the federal government is providing money at the border. It doesn't make any sense. He's violating basic humanity of these asylum seekers. I think he's involved in a conspiracy of corruption in the fact that he is unwilling to see the humanity and the trauma that these migrants have faced on their journey from their home countries to the United States, and just sticking them on buses where they don't have sponsors, where they don't have a family network. Doesn't make any sense.
Chris, time?
If I could just follow up on that question, how many shelters do we have right now?
Let Commissioner Kanazi answer that.
We currently have 7 shelters and 3 respite centers.
7?
7.
You can get one more. It looks like you had one more question.
Get an answer there. Mayor, can you also speak to any communication you've had with Brandon Johnson's team about this? You're talking about the spike is continuing. It will then be his job. Can you speak at all about the transition that's been going on along these lines? Yeah,
we've been briefing the Mayor-elect's team all along. We've had several substantive briefings in the last couple of weeks because, as you know, as of Monday, he assumes the mantle of being the mayor of the city. His team is going to own responsibility for this. So we wanted to make sure, and we will continue to be in contact with them to make sure that they are fully up to speed on the latest information that we have to help them take over responsibility for this continuing crisis.
Easy.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Somewhat on that note, you know, obviously the Budget Committee just approved $50 million, but your budget director described quite a fiscal cliff by the end of June, saying those dollars are going to run out and there are going to be hard decisions that need to be made. What options are available to your successor if the competitive federal grant dollars that the city's, you know, planning to apply for don't come through? Should Mr. Johnson consider dipping into, you know, advanced pension payment funds, for instance, or what options are really going to be available to him if federal dollars don't come through?
Look, I don't want to speculate about that. My hope is that the federal dollars will come through. We're working with our entire delegation, including our 2 senators, to make the case. I want to commend in particular Representative Quigley and Representative Kelly, who I've personally been in contact with and are making the case for us. So I'm going to be optimistic and hope that people in Washington will wake up to the reality of what's happening in cities like Chicago, and we're going to keep fighting that fight. Look, we want to make sure, part of the reason we asked for monies to take us through the end of June is to give the mayor-elect and his team the ability to really get their arms around the circumstances and really understand in great detail. We wanted to give them breathing room to be able to do that. But yes, this issue is going to come up again in the not too distant future.
What about the suggestion from Alderman Haddon that you use McCormick Place or Navy Pier or some of the shuttered big box stores to get people out of the police stations? And also, why aren't people in police stations being fed?
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of anybody not being fed. We are doing everything that we can to make their stay there as short as possible, which is why we're looking at other alternatives, respite places in particular, and opening up other beds throughout our shelter system. But secondly, it doesn't make any sense to shut down McCormick Place and Navy Pier that are huge economic drivers in the city that have conventions and meetings already booked out through next year. That's just simply not a viable option, and I'm not sure why that was put on the table. We can't disrupt the flow of business at McCormick Place and at Navy Pier to solve this challenge. We've looked at every available big box store. As I've said, it's not simply just a matter of space. It's a matter of space where we can manage a population humanely. We're not just warehousing people. We're not going to treat them in the same way that we've seen Governor Abbott do without any regard for their humanity. We've got to put them in places where they can have respite, where they can go to the bathroom, where they can have shower, where there's the possibility of a hot meal. And in many instances of the inventory of vacant places that we've looked at, hundreds really, over the course of time, there are very few that fit the criteria that are needed to be able to accommodate these migrants in a way that we believe is fitting with their humanity and fitting with our role as a welcoming city.
Hi, Mayor. One of the components of the emergency declaration gives the chief procurement officer emergency purchasing power. Is there anything set up so far in line of that, or what kind of needs do you or the people standing behind you anticipate through that portion of the order?
Well, I mean, the first thing is making sure that we continue and expand our staffing capabilities to accommodate these various shelters and respite centers that we're setting up. That's the first order of business on an emergency basis that the chief procurement officer will exercise her authority to address.
Hi, Mayor. So as of now, those families at the police stations will have to remain there. Is there a timeline? Or
We're trying to move them out as expeditiously as we possibly can. It is not appropriate for them to be at police stations, because what we're seeing is not just singles, but families with children. That's why we have been saying now for quite some time, we don't have any more space. I cannot emphasize that enough. And we can't live in a perpetual cycle of people coming in from cities in Texas with one-way plane tickets to Chicago, where they don't have sponsors, where they don't have a family network, and then ending up at our police station. That is not the way to go.
and then just really quickly, aside from food, are they being provided health screenings at all?
Yes, they are. That should, of course, be happening at the border. That should not be our responsibility, but we have from the very beginning made sure in partnership with Cook County that we're providing people with the health screenings that are necessary. I think we want to go here. I think we're going to go here. I think we're going to Craig Dellamore, Fran.
Mayor, as your Commissioner Kanazi heard at the hearing that was just held, there are some aldermen, there are some people in the public who fear that the kind of aid, extra aid that they're seeing now going to the new arrivals is coming at the expense of already overtaxed services within the city itself, for the homeless, for poor people. What can you say to assure them that they are not, that the sacrifice isn't going to be shared by people who are already having troubles?
Yeah, I've heard people say that. And I will remind aldermen of the budgets that they vote for, of the services that we provide at historic levels in many instances, whether it's to the homeless, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's support for youth, the environment. We're not short-circuiting anyone. We are doing what we need to do. We're making sure that we fulfill the commitments that were made as part of our budgets. We're executing on those with fidelity. And the members that are saying that, I'm going to send them a copy of the budget book and remind them what they voted for, because we are executing on the commitments that were made in the various appropriations just last year and the year before, and we report regularly to the City Council on how we're doing, how those monies are being spent. So I understand the concern. Some of it is rhetoric. But the reality is that we are executing on the appropriations authority that the City Council has given us, and we report in on a regular basis with fidelity and transparency about what those are. So I don't want anybody to leave here today, anybody within the sound of my voice, thinking that somehow we're short-circuiting Chicagoans, because we are simply not.
Hi. Has President Biden or anyone from his administration given you any direct response to your request for federal assistance?
That's an interesting question. What I will say is this. We have had lots of dialogue, but I'm disappointed in the allocation of FEMA dollars that we just got and that was announced last week. We got $5.5 million last fall. We got just over $4 million this time. That doesn't make any sense to me, and we have made our disappointment known through the appropriate channels, but I'm calling upon the federal government to solve this problem. And I'll emphasize again, if we could put people to work legally, it would lessen the strain on all of our resources. When there's no outflow from our shelters because folks can't work legally, That presents a huge challenge, not just here in Chicago, but all across the nation, all the cities like Chicago that have seen this influx of migrants coming to our cities. We need to be able to get them to work. As you know, there's a shortage of employees all across the nation. Chicago's no different. I am confident that we could put to work every able-bodied adult if they had work permits and we were able to do so legally. This is something that I have been talking about with anyone who will listen in the federal government, from the Labor Secretary to the Homeland Security Secretary, the head of Customs and Border Patrol, of course, folks in the White House. They have got to act with all deliberate speed to issue work permits to the people who are already here so that we can lessen the burden. If they're able to go out and work and take care of themselves and pay for housing, it will solve a lot of the challenges that we are seeing. It's not happening with the kind of speed that is necessary given the crisis that we are all facing.
Mayor,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Can I ask one thing? You've always been so reluctant about the National Guard.
That's a wrap, everyone.
Under what circumstances would you use the National Guard and call them out?
Well, I'm reluctant under the National Guard, and we've talked about it in entirely different circumstances. The circumstances here would be for them to come in and help support with staffing and with logistics. We're not at that point yet. And the National Guard is not a panacea. Many people think, call out the National Guard. It's not a panacea. They have limited abilities. They have limited durations of time that they can be in a place. It's a resource that is available, but we've got to use that resource wisely, and it's not going to solve the challenge in the long term. Maybe we get 30, 40 people for a short period of time. Keep in mind the National Guard are people that have other lives, other jobs, that they are primarily volunteers, sometimes on a full-time basis, but it's not a long-term solution. So if I need to do that, certainly I wouldn't hesitate to do it. I've done it in the past under different circumstances, but it's not a panacea. Thank you all.